I was inspired to found Build My SOP because I was a manager running these facilities for many years, and the Achilles heel I've seen in every business that I've entered has always been their standard operating procedures and their employee training. Build My SOP offers document management, learning management, and task management for our business owners and our managers. We're a really easy platform to be able to navigate and to be able to track and keep revisions of all of the changes that you've made within the years of your facility being open. And the plants don't stop growing and retail stores don't stop selling. And so it's very challenging to keep up with this when you're also having to get product out of the door at the end of the day. People should sign up with Build My SOP right now because regulations are in place right now. Regulations are going to be in place in the future, and things are going to be evolving and changing as long as this industry is here. We're really a vendor that people can trust. We're helping people with their bottom line, creating homogenized products, creating employee accountability, and just helping them with that peace of mind at the end of the day. Hey everybody, happy, what is it, Tuesday only? Wednesday?
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. It's already been one of those weeks. Here with me today, I'm Kady Cravens, your host today for Ask the Regulator. And we don't have Tom with us today. We miss you, Tom. But with me is Barry Duggan. He is the owner over at Rio Grande Analytics. And it's Thursday. Oh, Lauren, should we just start this whole thing again? I'm just going to do a whole new intro. Okay. Hi, everybody. Kady Cravens, your host of Ask the Regulator. With me today is Barry Duggan over at Rio Grande Analytics here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we're going to talk all about testing today. How you doing, Barry?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I know that Outdoor Harvest just landed at your guys' facility. A lot of testing going on. So we appreciate you taking the time to discuss some of the challenges in regulatory testing, especially in a new market like Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Absolutely. The Outdoor Harvest rule changes that are coming through. We've been getting a lot of samples in the last few weeks. And so definitely working through the system, but a high volume of samples coming through right now. So.
Well, thanks for the time. So a little bit about my background. I am janitor to now CEO over at buildmysop.com, working in almost every single position in the cannabis industry, really identifying a lot of the pain points throughout each facility type, and becoming really dependent on those SOPs, and now here to preach the power of SOPs to the cannabis community. And Barry, I'll let you give us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with Rio Grande Analytics.
Definitely. So I started this business with two of my other friends in 2016. We were all NMSU employees. We had, benefits, retirement, full-time jobs, and we were looking for supplemental income. At the time, there was not much cannabis activity in Las Cruces, New Mexico, because it's surrounded by checkpoints. And so we had a small business on the side providing testing services for the few participants that were in that region. And over time, things began to expand. Obviously, recreational adult use has happened now. So we are a full-time testing lab. Our home base is Albuquerque, New Mexico now, and we are expanding back to Las Cruces, hopefully by January, be operational there. So.
Awesome. So has that happened all within a year for you guys, or 2 years?
About 2 years, there was a delivery mechanism in New Mexico called Hotshot Services, and it basically closed almost overnight. And so we went from getting daily deliveries of samples to driving around New Mexico to pick up our own samples. And that was about a 600-mile loop every week. And so we ultimately relocated to Albuquerque, where most of the action was. Then as soon as we got to Albuquerque, adult use hit, and a lot of the production went back south. And so because that region of the state is surrounded by checkpoints, we're opening a lab to serve the needs of that part of the state.
Yep, all the lovely challenges that come with not only just a new business, but one that has ever-changing, quickly changing regulations.
Definitely.
And things like depending on one courier.
Yeah,
things like that.
There are more couriers that are getting set up in New Mexico, and I think that will help relieve some of the strain. This is just a very large state. There's many rural operators, and so with only 3 labs currently in New Mexico that are all within 100 miles of each other, it's difficult to get samples from various parts of New Mexico.
Do you know how many licenses between like manufacturers and cultivators there are right now?
I'm not sure exactly. I've heard there's over 1,000 license holders, but
Yeah.
I don't know which category they're all in.
I know there's a little over 400 dispensaries. So I would say probably about 600 to 700
I would imagine so.
that all require testing,
Definitely.
with three facilities in New Mexico right now.
It's a lot coming online. And so we're excited. We're definitely expanding, looking for more labs to come in. It'll be good to have other operators here in New Mexico that can help validate some of the tests that go out. And if one lab has a question, it's nice to be able to partner with somebody else or collaborate with somebody to answer some of these difficult to answer questions.
Let's talk a little bit about that transition over from medical to adult use. And now I assume you're testing for both.
We are, correct. And then also doing some testing for the hemp program here in New Mexico as well.
Great. That's wonderful. So for medical and adult use, what are the differences between testing requirements, if any?
Currently they're the same. The hemp testing is more potency based, but the adult use and medical, we test similar to what your groceries would get, things that indicate good cleanliness, manufacturing practices, those kind of things, yeast and mold and salmonella and some of those things that could be available or on the product. So those are some of the compounds that are organisms that we look at to make sure that the products are safe for people. We look at residual solvents, we look at potency, obviously. And we've got some other basically research and development tests that we can do for people as they make new products or formulations.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Definitely so.
What are they looking for? Like, what kind of results are they looking for, or what kind of tests, I should say, are they looking for?
There's
R&D.
There are some people that still want to continue looking for mycotoxins just to ensure a higher level of safety on their products, or they're able to label for more things. Some of the companies that we look for extra residual solvents, not just what's on our New Mexico list. So different things like that.
Cool. What is the most current change that's happened here in New Mexico that's kind of rocking all the boats?
At the beginning of November, we started doing pesticide and homogeneity testing. And so that has increased the sample size significantly. So we're just working on expanding our services, getting more equipment, and having higher throughput to accommodate these rule changes. And so there's about 15 pesticides on the list for New Mexico that we're looking at. And then this homogeneity test, which is subject to, or flower and trim is subject to, looks at the variability of the batches. If something is labeled 20%, how variable are the products that would be sold under that batch size? And so, depending on your lot size, if you have a 15-pound batch or a 5-pound batch, there's more or less testing involved with that. And so those are the new tests that have come online, and we're just working through the challenges of accommodating those. But things are moving forward, and we're marching on. So.
Yep. I mean, that's really our only choice. But it is something to think about and talk about, especially for people who are getting involved in new states, putting their costs together. Regulatory changes can happen in what seems like overnight, considering they just legalized in April for
Definitely.
Adult use, and already, what has it been, 6-7 months?
Just like that.
Into it. Huge changes happening that's going to cost the operator, you said, about a 25% increase in testing pricing?
We are increasing because of the pesticide test, and so we'll probably be about $225 per sample. Obviously we've got volume discounts and other discounts that we can offer to people to try and drive that cost down, but making sure we can operate and continue to operate and protect public health and safety is what we've got to do first. So.
That's very well said. I, for one, am grateful that for the majority of all of the testing regulations, because I have no idea what I smoked in college. It's really scary. It's quite scary. And even being in Colorado in 2014, they were just now getting into like the Eagle 20. And that was the fire department who really took hold of that, because the fire department would come in and their employees were getting sick. Because of the pesticides that were being applied in the cultivation. And so they really took charge of the pesticide thing, and it was more for their own internal health and safety.
This is a test that's just started this week, and so we'll see what is being used. We are set up for the 15 or so pesticides that are required by the state, but we're also able to screen about 60 more on top of that. And so if things show up, or if there's other agencies that need a secondary look, we're able to offer those services to them as well.
So I've always been kind of curious. Is there a certain percentage that comes in that fails?
There definitely is, and there was more in the under the previous regulations. The way that we tested for yeast and mold was a very broad approach, and so now we're looking at specific mold species, and there will most likely be less failures because of that.
What drove that change for the state to change the scope in which they tested mold and yeast?
I'm not positive what caused all of the different changes, but for New Mexico, we used to test for mycotoxins, and those are compounds that could be deposited by the specific molds that we're looking at now. In New Mexico, there hasn't been any detectable mycotoxins that I'm aware of since 2016. And so we decided to, or I guess the regulators decided that that is a test that we're charging people for that is always a non-detect. Let's look and see if the organism is present. And so now we've gone from a plating technique to look at total molds to a PCR-based test similar to like COVID, where it looks at the genes in these organisms that would make the mycotoxin. And so we can do a really targeted analysis to see if those are present or absent, and a higher degree of confidence with that.
And for turnaround time, did that help with you guys?
That definitely impacted our turnaround time, because you can plate hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of samples a day if need be, and in PCR you can only plate so many. Even on a 96 well plate, you have primer sets, you have positive controls, negative controls, and so you're not doing 98 at a time, you're doing a fraction of that. And then once it goes into the instrument that does the analysis, that takes a couple of hours also. So it definitely did cause a little bit of a bottleneck, but we've expanded the capabilities that our microbiological team has, and so that should allow our throughput to increase steadily.
Nice, very good. So for these new changes, before the changes happened in November in New Mexico, how long did it take you guys to get all of the necessary tests results back?
We were on a pretty good track of 3 to 4 to maybe 5 business days when we were able to do plating and those other techniques. With the amount of samples that we have from the outdoor harvest, and you have to understand, last year there were not hundreds and hundreds of license holders. There was less than 100 license holders, and so it's much easier to manage an outdoor harvest from these few producers as opposed to all of these new license holders getting their first outdoor crop that may not necessarily understand the paperwork involved and all of the things necessary to drop off samples legitimately. And so, helping people with that, the amount of samples we're getting with an outdoor harvest, the amount of samples that we're trying to get through the system before rules change because price increase. We got hit with a lot of different things from a lot of different angles at once. And so, we're kind of in the 10 days to 2 week turnaround right now, but also we've increased all of our throughput on all of the tests that we do. And so that number will come down much closer to a week-ish, or what our previous turnaround time was.
Well, and also, you're not going to have to deal with all the outdoor cultivars until next season.
These are kind of one-time deals, and it's freezing.
But for the rule change to happen right as outdoor is all getting submitted,
it compounded a lot of different things.
Whose idea was that? Like, why would the state do that?
Well, and at some point you just have to say we're going to go now. And we were going to start pesticides a couple of years ago. If we make a list, people might use something not on a list, and so it was really hard to determine what we're going to test for. And then COVID hits, and then there's supply chain issues, and then service engineers or installation engineers can't come to your facility to install equipment to even do those tests. And so because of all of these unforeseen things, it's all just kind of happening at once.
Yeah.
Which it needs to. Pesticides are nobody wants pesticides on their cannabis products, and we need to screen for those kind of things. We have an exponential amount of new users coming to this state, and so we just need to ensure public health and safety, and I think pesticides are going to be one of the key factors of doing that.
How many tests have you guys run for pesticides so far?
Only a handful, because we've had to turn several people away at the door because they didn't realize these rule changes came into effect. And so they show up and they don't have enough material, or it's not packaged in the way that it's supposed to. And so, you know, we've definitely got several in-house, but it's not like last week when we were getting hundreds and hundreds. There are people understanding how they have to package now and the different increments they need to provide. And so I'll have a better feel for that probably in a week or two on
Yeah.
what the volume's going to look like.
Yeah.
But
Have you
there's no end
seen
in sight.
have you seen any bad tests yet?
We've done some R&D for different people for some things that they thought maybe were pesticides, or products they purchased, wholesale, that they wanted to just screen and be sure. And the ones that we have run so far, we haven't seen anything. So
That's good news.
that is definitely good news. But
That
again,
makes me proud of our
we
operators.
have not had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds through the system yet. And so, like I said, I need a little bit more
It's
time to
bound
get
to
more data
happen.
to see,
Yeah.
what percentage of samples will fail for those kind of tests.
Yeah.
And, when residual solvents came to New Mexico, a lot of people failed for the first couple of weeks, and then they figured out what to do, and there's not many failures for that anymore.
Yeah.
And I suspect pesticides will be similar, where there will be some failures up front, but people will realize how to manage their operations better or more efficiently, and those tests will most likely all be passing.
You live and you learn.
That's part of it.
So let's talk a little bit about, for New Mexico specifically, what is required for them. How can operators make your life easy? How do they need to be prepared to submit their testing, and how do they need to do that in a compliant manner?
Definitely. BioTrack is a big part of all of the testing and chain of custody documents. And so people will manifest samples to us in BioTrack, and then the BioTrack will generate a transport manifest for them. That will be accompanied by our sample submission, so we know who it's coming from, which tests they would like performed, and then what name goes with what BioTrack ID. One of the difficult things that we've had over the years is people show up with a giant bag of individual samples and none of them are labeled. And so we have 20 different barcodes, but none of the barcodes are on the bags. And so, we have to let them know these need to be labeled this way so that we can process the samples. And showing up without the correct information definitely impacts the time it takes to do the analysis.
Mhm.
And so, at this point, depending on what your lot size is, we'll have one sample in a 4-gram container, and then we'll have extra samples individually bagged based on the lot size so that we can do the homogeneity test. And so the tests required are potency, homogeneity, pesticides, and for concentrates or things that were made with solvents, residual solvents. And then we do still provide the services that we had before, which were the plating techniques or mycotoxins, if people want those. They're not required at this time, but we want to keep those in place in case rules change where they come back, or there's a big outbreak of something and we need to look at it with different techniques. We want to keep as many services in-house as we can.
Could you give us an example of what a big outbreak would look like?
Yeast and mold on plants, or bud rots, or
Would you see them in multiple facilities at the same time, or just like within their facility?
It would typically be within their facility. We do not do a lot of site visits. We've definitely toured different grows and helped when there have been visible issues, but it's not something that we do a lot of. So these are usually things that have come up with their own internal SOPs and say, hey, we've got a problem, can you help? That's typically when we get involved with those kind of things.
That's cool that you offer that. And it's always different state to state, right? So Michigan, the testing facility is responsible to go out and collect all of the samples.
And that that's set to start in March for New Mexico.
Yeah, which it makes sense. I know when I was collecting test samples, I always tried to, especially for the potency sample, I always tried to take the top, trichome heavy piece of the, the branch.
I feel different ways about it, because say I have to dispatch somebody to go collect a sample, they're not going to take it off of a growing plant. And so we don't necessarily know if it even came from that facility.
Right.
And also, if there's 1,000 license holders, how do we actively get to all of those in a timely manner and then provide all of these services that are getting extended because of the volume of the tests? that's still something I think we need to figure out a little bit better.
Yeah, and March is right around the corner.
It'll be here tomorrow.
Blink. Yeah, that's especially with holidays. Then there's March.
Oh yeah, definitely so.
So we have a question from David. David's letting us know that in Croatia, they're in hemp belt. They don't use anything for pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides that's not organic. And his question for you, Barry, is how do you clean cannabis from bugs and all of the air contaminants?
I'm more of an analytical person on the lab side of things, and so I don't have a lot of post-harvest experience. And a lot of times the plants have been trimmed or gone through, picked clean before they get to our facility. And so, there have been times where we see little cocoons or some insects inside of plants, but I can only think of maybe a handful of times that we've had that experience. And so a lot of that stuff is done before the samples are actually submitted to the lab. And so I don't have a great feel for that. I wish I could answer that question better. You maybe in your experience from post-harvest physiology or being in a cultivation facility.
I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of different tactics. I'm not sure that any of them were actually correct. I've been more of the person who moves all the pieces and the parts together.
I got you.
And gets all the things compliantly done. So I worked as a cultivation assistant and I've run harvests before, but yeah, we would pretty much just tell them to get really into the plant during trimming. We'd have to hand trim, especially if we used like ladybugs or anything to treat.
Definitely.
We'd have to go in afterwards and make sure there were no ladybugs in our plants.
Well, I guess one thing I could say about that too is we used to get really large buds for testing in general, and a lot of people have shifted to giving us more smaller buds because one, it represents the plant a little bit better. There's potentially less stem involved, and so it may not drive down a potency value. And those smaller pieces are easier to see if there's insects or things, and those are typically removed before they would get to our facility.
And we have a LinkedIn user that asked, are there regulations against plants having their own testing on site? So I have worked in facilities where we actually had our own testing equipment just there for R&D purposes before we actually invested in and submitted product. So as we were developing, what our vape cartridges were going to look like and all the different things that we were doing to create, the distillate that we were using in those vape cartridges, we would test on site. And then to be able to send them out, though, it has to go through a third-party testing.
Yeah, I know of several different companies here in New Mexico that have internal testing capabilities, but for a certificate of analysis for compliance, it would have to go to a third party.
Cool. Well, is there anything else that you kind of just wanted to let operators know from a testing lab perspective? Be prepared.
Definitely be prepared.
Know your lot size.
Look at our website. We try and keep as much information on the website as we can about changing regulations, our lead time. We're definitely taking longer to turn around samples right now, but like I said, these are a couple of different things that made the perfect storm, and this is a seasonal issue that should be taken care of in the next couple of weeks. And so also with opening the Las Cruces facility, that's going to allow us to divide and conquer the amount of samples that we're getting through the door, and so it won't be bottlenecked all at one facility. We can move things around to have higher throughput as well. But RioGrandeAnalytics.com is our website. There's a lot of other information available there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Barry. I
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it. I've been so excited for this conversation. I know that a bunch of our listeners out there have been excited too. Also, guys, call and ask your testing facility how to prepare before you take your first submission in. Most likely they're going to point you to a wonderful resource that's on their website. Know your lot size, know how much is required for those sizes that you're putting in, know how you have to properly label, how you have to manifest, even who does that transfer. In your state, you could be required to use a courier to transfer from facility to testing lab, or you might be able to take it on your own, or like in Michigan, it might have to be picked up. So just know before you go and then have to be turned away at the door because nobody wants to have to go through that. So
absolutely.
Okay, cool. Well, Barry, thanks so much.
Definitely.
Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.